So what we're going to see in this video is the operation of the Slocan Lake Rail Barge on my model railroad. I became interested in the Kootenays, the southern British Columbia area, particularly because of the operation on the Slocan Lake. I found it very fascinating that whole trains would be loaded onto barges and then barged off to remote isolated branches where they'd be reassembled. So I wanted to make sure that was an element of the railway right from the beginning. I was also able to use it as the mechanism that transfers the trains from the 42-inch height, which is what Slocan City is at, up to the 70-inch height, the fourth level, which is where Rosebery and the cusp are. So what we see here is the Slocan Lake Rail Barge. All the rail barges in southern British Columbia were quite interesting in that they actually rode on old rail bogies on rails that actually went into the lake. And in order to get the gross adjustment in height of the slips, the rail slip, barge slips, the slips were actually pulled out of the water by the locomotives or left into the water, and that allowed to get gross adjustment, and then fine adjustment was made with a series of counterweights. What we see here is one of the rail barges. I made up a couple of them, and the Iris G, which is the small tug that was operated on the area, in order to get power transmitted to the barges. What I did is I just got a couple of brass wipers that are sprung, a little bit of spring in them, and they contact brass pilings that are drilled and mounted into the railroad. So the physical connection between the barge is made by pushing the barge up against the pilings, which makes the electrical connection as well, and the two pilings there, and then pushing it this way against the slip. The slip is actually securely mounted into the railroad with a couple of big screws, and it's all made out of brass. So it's actually quite sturdy, and some of the detail stuff actually is made out of styrene, but most of it's made out of brass. So we'll just show the rail barge being loaded, and then we'll show me manually moving it up to Rosebery where we'll unload it. So the operation of the rail barge, the way freight would make its way up from Nelson to Slocan City, which is where the large mill was at, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And on Wednesdays, the train would load itself onto the rail barge and make its way up to Rosebery and then the cusp. On the other days, it would actually just simply load the barge if necessary, and the barge would be taken light, effectively, up to Rosebery, and then the cars would be winched off the Rosebery slip. The following day, then, when the train made its way up, it would actually assemble the cars that it brought with the cars that had been left on the Rosebery slip and then make its way to the cusp. So we'll show that. So when we actually get to Rosebery, we'll see there's some cars that have been left there from the previous day. So I'll hurry things up a little bit just so that we don't drag too long in the video. So now the locomotive is going to load itself and the caboose onto the barge. As with the prototype, it's a fairly delicate operation. They actually used specifically modified H-liners and then jeeps on the operation that had enough clearance to keep things from riding too rough on the slip. We'll slow things down a little bit closer to prototype speed. I think the speed limit was like 5 or 10 miles an hour when you were loading the barges on the slip. And they didn't worry about loading one car on one side then one car on another. If the barge was sturdy enough to take a whole locomotive, it was sturdy enough to load one whole side then the other. So what we're going to show now is actually me taking the barge up to Rosebery. It's an owner-only operation. I don't let the operators do this just because I don't want them to feel so guilty if they dump a whole consist on the floor. So I'm just going to move up to the fourth level, put my finger there, and lift the whole train. Up to Rosebery. Once it's up there, it's easy to slide it around. I haven't finished the pilings in this area, as you can see. So So the Rosebery slip was very, very similar in design to the Slocan one. It was a little different in its A-frame structure, and I've had to compress this one a lot more than I had to compress the Slocan one. And additionally, there was a curve in my model which didn't exist in the prototype. Here we can see a few cars that have been winched off from the day before. So take it nice and slow. Line the couplers. Take it nice and easy around that transition curve. Now we can move a little more quickly. Now we're off the slip. So this is Rosebery, and in the back we have Rosebery Yard, which is where the train will be made up for the trip to Nakusp. Right now I'm just going to grab the rest of the cars, pull them off the slip, and we'll end the video. The main shipments out of Nakusp were poles that were carried on skeleton flats and wood product in boxcars. The main stuff coming into Nakusp was fuel oil and propane for the fuel dealerships that were at Browse and Nakusp. In the olden days, this was actually one of the points. Oops, got to disconnect here. There we go. This was actually the connection point to Caslow, which was on the on Kootenay Lake to the east of Rosebery, and the line actually continued on to New Denver and then up to Sandon, which was discontinued in the 50s, but there was a big mining operation there. So that demonstrates the operation of the rail barge.